everything is unclear and mixed up. Similarly, you can have the experience after death if you go to the world of the Gandharvas. The experience in this case would be better, but still not clear enough. You would be like seeing your reflection in water. But if you go to Brahma Loka, the world of Brahma or Ishvara, the experience is very good. There you can see yourself as distinctly as you see the difference between light and shade. It is not easy to get into that world, however. You have to combine work with knowledge and push both to the highest level. But why should you not take full advantage of being born as a human being? Why not use this opportunity to realize the self, so that you attain liberation in this very life? Why wait until you die? So it says that just as a clear reflection is seen in a clear mirror, so also the self is seen in a pure mind. Now, the word they use, the self, it actually means God. And it's called self because ultimately that's the real self within us. Now right now we exist and we live as human beings. And that sense of being a human being is based on the idea that myself is this physical body and it's also the mind. It's my inner thoughts and feelings and memories and so forth. Now in that state of consciousness, it's actually consciousness itself connected with body and mind. Body and mind are both instruments. They're tools, vehicles which consciousness uses in order to be in this world, to experience it, to play our role in this world, and so forth. And as such, it's useful. But the problem comes is that we get so absorbed in the body and the mind, in what we're seeing from outside, that we lose touch with who we are, who we actually are. And this is where spiritual life is really kind of trying to move back to that consciousness, that knowledge of who we actually are, because as soon as you find that, then you find God. Now in Hinduism, in Vedanta, the term they use for God is Brahman. And this is not a personal God sitting in heaven somewhere or anything. It's kind of the impersonal, what they call substratum. It's like the ocean. The ocean is there. And on the ocean, different waves come. And so each individual, we're like different waves on that one ocean. We come for a while, and then we disappear. But the ocean is always there. And this whole universe is kind of contained, it's like actually just a small bubble in the ocean of Brahman. Now when we identify with the body and mind, we become very small. We say, I'm this particular individual here. And then we live our life and we seek our goals and our desires and so forth, and sometimes we get success and we're happy, other times we fail and then we're unhappy, but like that, everything in a very small way. But when we begin to search within, we begin to discover, oh, there's actually something else here, something more than me. Now most people, in most religions, they refer to that thing as God. That person who's begun to lead a life, with some prayer, meditation, some inwardness, eventually begins to sense, yes, there's actually something here. They begin to feel different. And they begin to feel a sense of calm and peace, gradually a sense of confidence, and a sense of joy, of security. Everything's okay. There's nothing to worry about. I'm fine. That sense starts to come when we start to go kind of deeper within our own self. All of our fears, all of our anxieties, all of our kind of limitations, all the things that cause us to fail, so these are coming out of the mind. Now the mind is like, it creates like clouds in the sky. And because those clouds are there, you don't see the sun. So you go out on Sundays, everything is dark and gloomy and cold and miserable, like today. And you think, oh, it's such a gloomy world. But actually the sun is always there. It's always shining, just as bright as ever. But the clouds have gotten in the way and they blocked it out, and so we're not aware of it. Now in spiritual practices, meditation, things like that, you're trying to remove those clouds that form a barrier between you and the realization of the presence of God. You're gradually trying to remove those clouds so that you can uncover the truth. Normally how we experience things and how we know things is through the mind and through the intellect. And mind and intellect, they're like a mirror. And the idea is that if the mirror is completely covered with dirt, and dust and dirt and things, you don't see anything at all. You look and you don't see anything at all in the mirror. But if you, in spiritual practice, then you gradually you're starting to try to clean the mirror, and gradually you begin to see some light in it. You begin to see gradually a shape is there. And the more you clean the mind, the purer it becomes, then the more you see the true reflection of what's there. But yet, what's reflected in the mirror, the thing that's being reflected, is not the mirror. But when we get our kind of mind purified enough to realize, oh, that's what's there, then the transition comes at some point, and we wake up. And we realize, I'm not the mirror, I'm not that reflection coming in mind, I'm that sun that's shining. And this is the realization that comes. Normally, theoretically, it's always there. And this is the important thing to remember, is that always God is with us, we're just not aware of it. And He's always very, very close to us, but we're not aware of it. It's like you're looking in one direction and somebody's standing right behind you, and they're there, inches away, but you don't know it because you're not looking in the right direction. So all of our consciousness, our attention is focused outside and towards the external world and towards our mind and so on. That's where we're not aware of who's there, of what is the consciousness that's actually experiencing these things. And this is the basic idea in Vedanta, is that our real nature, our real self, is what they call the Sakshi, or the witness. We're in this world, and we think, oh, I'm in this world, and I'm kind of experiencing all of the things that are going on in the world and in my life and so forth, and we think, okay, this is reality, this is the real world. But in truth, we're just watching. We're always in God, and we're just watching the world unfold like a movie. We're not in it at all. And this is this shift of attitude is what is found particularly in the path of Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. Is learning how to stand back from things, to realize, okay, this is going on, I'm seeing those things, but there's something else here. There's a witness, an awareness, which is experiencing those things, and gradually it comes to a point where you realize that that witness, that consciousness, that awareness is actually not the things, not the experiences themselves. It's something completely different. And then all the limitations, all the kind of domination which the world and your own mind have over you, those start to lessen and kind of release you, and you begin to stand back in your real self. And this is basic practice called detachment, of learning how to just, in all experiences, to keep a part of yourself kind of aloof from it. Standing back, realizing, okay, this is going on, I'm aware of it, and I'm dealing with it, but there's a part of me that knows that it's something separate. As you do this, gradually two things begin to happen. First thing is that the world doesn't affect you as much as it used to. And secondly, your own mind, it doesn't affect you as much as it used to. And so you begin to calm down. You begin to get stable. You begin to get a sense of, okay, I'm on kind of solid ground now. And for many, many people, this is a very important thing, because their life and their mind is in total turmoil, total chaos all the time, and totally disturbed and upset all the time, who are full of fears and anxieties and stress and all kinds of things going on, and they don't know kind of how to control it. But when you start to develop this sense of detachment, you gradually begin to shift in attitude from the feeling that, okay, I'm angry, and then being totally disturbed by it, to saying, okay, there's anger in the mind, but I'm just watching it. Like a scientist, I'm just watching the anger, and I see, okay, it's in the mind for a while. After a while, it goes away, and something else comes in. In this way, you're gradually starting to take your stand, not on the outside world, which does all kinds of things to you, or not on the mind, which goes to all kinds of crazy different ways and can do worse things to you than the world can, but you begin to take your stand on something deeper. And as you do this, you're not only getting kind of stabilized, getting less affected by the negative things that go on in the world, but you're also beginning to become aware that there's something else here. And as soon as you begin to truly sense that something else, then it's like, okay, everything falls into place. Everything's okay now. It doesn't mean you get a better job, make more money. It doesn't mean you even necessarily get better health or anything else. It means simply that you begin to realize, well, I'm fine. Things are good. I'm not kind of being twisted and tortured and things by what's going on in the world and in my mind and so on. I'm getting back into a sense of being my real self. And this then, as soon as you begin to sense that real self, what you can say that deep kind of presence of God within, then it begins to unfold. So at first there's kind of a protection and moving out of the kind of negative things, out of fear and other things, but then there comes a gradual unfoldment of what's ultimately the infinite divinity that's there within each and every individual. And so this is kind of the spiritual path. Now, it starts, for the most part, with some kind of spiritual practice, which gradually begins to clean off the mirror of your mind. Because without that, if you don't have, if the mirror is totally covered, you don't have any sense that there's anything else, anything, any other reality, anything spiritual, any light. There's no sense of it. So slowly you have to start working. So you begin to actually get some sense that there's this higher thing there. And like that, for some time, you go on gradually getting better and better. Regular practicing meditation, other things, you're slowly cleaning your mirror, getting in better shape. You're finding yourself happier, more content, and a better person than you were before. And like that, you're progressing. But then comes a point, in order to attain what they call realization, where you actually realize God, where there's a complete shift in consciousness, where you, as the individual self, becomes actually that higher self, the small you, more or less disappears. It's not there anymore. What's there now is the true kind of spiritual consciousness, which you are, which you were before you were born, which you are now, and which you'll be after you're born. This body, this particular identity and personality, it's here for a few years and then it goes. Underlying that is the eternal self, which is the reality of your being. And so the ultimate goal is to just become aware of that, because when you become consciously aware of that, then you find, oh, this is what life's all about. This was the whole purpose. All the kind of the work I did, the different things they were all to help me reach this point where I get reunited. It's like coming home. It's like we're born in the palace. We're children of God, children of immortal bliss. We're wonderful spiritual beings, but we come into this world, and then we take on all kinds of delusions and problems and difficulties, and eventually then we sense that there's something more. There's something that I'm seeking, and eventually you begin to make kind of the return journey back to God. It's like our experience here, the human experience is like the story of the prodigal son, who he became impatient to get his inheritance, and so he began to pressure, give me my money now, give me my portion of the inheritance now. And so finally the father did. He said, okay, here's your share. And so the prodigal son, he went off to the big city, and he had friends, he partied every night, and just had a great time until he ran out of money. And then he found himself reduced to working for some farmer, and his salary was that he was taking care of the farmer's pigs. And his salary was he got to eat whatever the pigs didn't eat. And so he said, even the lowest servant in my father's house is better than this. Let me go back home, back to my father, and I'll offer to be a servant. But when he got home, his father was overjoyed to see him. And so, please come. And he told his older son to prepare the fatted calf to have a feast, because he who was lost has returned. In that way, we come out into this world, we come with a bit of our divine power, a bit of our divine talent and strength and energy with us, and then gradually we squander it away. We get older and older, we get worn out, we get exhausted, and we find, ourselves kind of lost. And then we begin to think, there's something better than this. And so gradually this then begins to search back to what is called coming home. And this is basically what it is. We're immortal souls, we're children of God, we have that wonderful divine presence within us and without us, looking after us, taking care of us, guiding us, if we can only kind of get back in touch with it. And so the process starts usually with some kind of practice, some kind of meditation or something, to get our mirror somewhat clean so you can start to get some sense of what's actually there. But then there comes a point where you actually realize that what you're experiencing through the mind and Lord, that's not actually it. It's just a reflection. When you look into the mirror, you see a face in the mirror, but that's not you. That's the body, but you, yourself, you're something completely different than that. And so this is where, what the scriptures are kind of teaching is to try to gradually step back into the awareness of what's truly there in the depths of our own being. And so this is what the Katha Upanishads are all about, and particularly the Katha Upanishad. So it's the knowledge, the full knowledge is already within you, but it's as long as the mind is, as I say, impure, and impure, they mean it's full of desires and it's full of ego. Because the root cause of our problems is ego, which means we separate ourselves from God. We take our little bit of consciousness and we attach it to this particular body, this particular mind, and then we say, I'm separate from God, I'm separate from everybody else in the universe. And this then creates the barrier between knowing God and knowing kind of the world. And so as we begin to have fewer desires, and desires are always a sense that I lack something, and so I reach out and I try to grab it. I try to grab it from another person or another job or by buying something new, but I'm trying to grab some happiness out of the world, and this then produces desires, which I think if I can get this thing here, this is what's going to make me happy. But in fact, eventually you discover that what makes you happy, that happiness is something that you are, something that's within you, has nothing to do with anything outside. And so as long as we're depending on the world and other people and things to give us happiness, then most of the time we're frustrated. You get frustrated, people get angry, upset and so forth. But when you find your happiness within, then every experience you go through becomes happy. In other words, a person can have $1 billion, he can have every kind of luxury, every pleasure in the world, and still be completely dissatisfied. Be completely bored and miserable. But once a person has touched a bit of that happiness that's within, then every kind of situation, good or bad, what we call good or bad, everything is joyous. Everything is filled with happiness because the happiness is there. And when you have your happiness, when you find I don't need anybody, I don't need to depend on anybody to do anything for me, I don't need to grab anything from anybody, then you begin to give. It begins to flow. Because the consciousness that you're approaching, that inner consciousness, that inner self, it's the self in all beings. There's the one and the same consciousness in every single being in this universe, from the amoeba up to the animals, to the plants, animals, men, everything. It's all the one consciousness. Egos cuts ourselves off of that. It like puts barriers around us. There's this little self, this is me, and we build like a little fortress around ourselves. And then we're always trying to get something to increase that self, to give us more power, to give us more money or happiness or whatever. But we're always trying to protect our own kind of little kingdom. But when you begin to move back towards the spiritual, you're gradually breaking down the walls. And then you start to live in harmony with the rest of the universe. And you begin to realize that I'm not alone. And this is a big problem in modern society, perhaps more than any time, practically in history, is the sense of people feeling isolated and cut off and alienated from the rest of society. Instead of that, you begin to feel, oh, I'm secure, I'm everything, I'm part of this whole kind of vast universal process. And the more you grow into that, the more you find yourself expressing that harmony, that oneness, instead of your own personal wants and needs and lacks and things like that. So, so as we develop in this, we're gradually, eventually you'll reach a point where you're not doing anything. You're not struggling to make anything happen. You're not struggling to solve any problems or get beyond difficulties. You find whatever you need, whatever inspiration you need, it just spontaneously begins to flow through you. See, we have God who is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, He's there, but we blocked him out. And now, with our little mind or a little intellect or educational, we're trying to struggle with this world. We're trying to make things happen the way we want. But as you remove the barriers, then God's power, God's wisdom, it can begin to operate through you, and you find that things happen wonderfully well without any stress or strain on your part. But it requires kind of breaking down these barriers that we create between our particular consciousness and the universal consciousness, and that's very difficult, very hard, because the ego, the sense of ego, the sense of this is me, and I'm taking care of me, that sense is very difficult, becomes very frightened at the thought of anything else. But as it happens, then you see that instead of manifesting your human nature, your emotional needs, and all kinds of things, you now begin to manifest the divine nature that's within you. And this is, as Swami Vivekananda said, that each soul is potentially divine, and the goal is to realize this and then to express this in our life. And basically this comes as we develop an attitude of surrender to God. And not my will, but thy will be done. As this attitude begins to develop, we're opening up a way for God to begin to come into our life and then to express itself through us. And then you see kind of wonderful things can begin to happen, because you're not limited by your human abilities anymore. You have all of God's power there. But he's not there to do what we want him to do. In other words, he's not there to come wash our car or do this or that or solve this problem. He's there to express himself, and and we have to get our ego with its own personal desires, telling God, no, do this and do that. You get all that out of the way, so then it can begin to come in, and then you see the tremendous transformation that takes place within your own experience, but also that it begins to flow out through your actions. So when they talk of self, and they talk of self with a capital S, what they mean is that that's your real self, who you really are, and that self is the self of everybody. Self with a small s, this is the personal self, the sense that I'm so-and-so, and I'm going to do this or that. But the self with a capital S that they talk about, this is the consciousness, the pure consciousness, the universal consciousness, which is the self within all beings. So the more we're focused on our own little self, the less of the higher self is there. The more kind of unselfish we become, the more unfocused on our own kind of personal life, then the more our consciousness begins to move back into that one consciousness. So then we come to the next verse. It says the sense organs have a separate origin in that they are products of the elements. They are active when an individual is awake, they are idle when he is asleep. A truly wise person knows that the self is independent of the sense organs, and he is therefore no longer susceptible to sorrow. So an ignorant person thinks that his body, along with its organs, is his self. This, of course, is a mistake. The self has nothing to do with the body and its organs, except that they are its tools, and it may sometimes use them. The self is always independent. The organs are derived from the 5 elements. Space, air, fire, water, and earth have provided, in that order, the organs. Hearing, the ears; touching, the skin; seeing, the eyes; tasting, the tongue; and smelling, the nose. The corresponding organs represent the elements in their sattvic, or subtle form. These organs are all organs of perceptions, or jnanendriyas. The elements in their rajasic, or grosser form, are represented by speech, vak; hands, pani; feet, pada; the organ of actuation, apayu; and the organ of procreation, upastha. These are the organs of action, karmendriyas. The mind, antakarana, is, however, produced by all the elements combined in the sattvic form. So the organs, they are all inanimate because they are derived from the elements. For the same reason, they are also perishable. They have a beginning and an end. Moreover, when an individual is awake, the organs are active. When he is sleepy, they are all inert. It must be clearly understood that the self is independent of the organs. The self is pure consciousness, but the organs are inanimate. They can work only if the self wishes them to. If the self leaves the body, which it does when death overtakes a person, the organs may all be intact, but they do not function. This shows that the organs are helpless without the self. The self has no beginning or end, as the organs do. It is always the same. An ignorant person thinks that the body-mind complex is the self. The body-mind complex is subject to pain and pleasure. And because a person identifies himself with the body-mind complex, he is also subject to pain and pleasure. But a wise person knows that he is the self, always the same, and beyond pain and pleasure. He is therefore never susceptible to sorrow. So one of our strongest senses of identity is with the body. You know, in fact, everybody to considerable extent thinks, okay, this body is me. This is what I am. If anything happens to the body, we say, oh, I'm hurt. I've been injured. And like that, the body can be a source of pleasure, it can give us enjoyment, and it can also though be a source of pain. And also the same is true of the mind. The mind can give us wonderful, because I got a very happy state of existence, but it can also be a source of great pain and suffering. And we are sensed that, okay, I'm alive, I exist, because this body is here. When the body goes, I'll be gone. Many people kind of think that way. But in fact, we're here. We're conscious, our sense of being, oh, this is me, I'm aware, is not due to the body. It's due to the consciousness, to the spirit within, which is only using the body. Body and mind, they're like a vehicle, like a car that you use to drive around in. It takes you places, lets you experience these things, but you're not the car. You're not the tools. You're something different. And so, I'm using examples sometimes in this class. One of the most common experiences they talk about, there's a lot of books that have come out now, like near-death experiences and things like that. One of the most common experiences that you run across is the person's on an operating table, and then suddenly he finds himself up near the ceiling and looking down on it and seeing all the doctors around the body working on it. Now, up to that point, that person had the idea that this body is me. I exist. I'm alive because of this body. This is what gives me life. But now suddenly they find themselves up near the ceiling. They looked at it, and that body is just an object, like a chair or a table. And they realize the thing within them, which is all along saying, "Oh, this is me. I exist. I'm aware." That thing is there, but it's not connected to the body anymore. In this way, we tend to think that, okay, I exist because this body is here. Whatever this body experiences, this is happening to me. And if the body is killed or destroyed, then I'm gone. But in fact, all the time, while the body is going through its experiences, the thing within you, which is saying, this is me, that I'm experiencing this, I'm aware of this, that thing is something totally different. And eventually this realization comes. At some point, everybody leaves the body, but then they'll find out, oh, I'm still here. But now I have got other bodies or other experiences that I go through. And like that, when we identify with the body, we identify with the limitations of the body. Like I said, when we're young and healthy and full of energy, that's not so bad. Body is a lot of fun. We can play sports. We can do different things. But as the body gets older, as it gets like 70 or 80 or 90, the body becomes a source of great suffering, great problems and misery. But by then, we become so attached to it, so used to saying, "Well, this body is me," that we keep holding on to it. And then we're drugged. With the body, we're drugged down through all these problems and sufferings that can come. But yet all the time, we're totally free of all that. We're totally separate from that. And none of the sufferings of the body can actually truly affect us. Swami Varadananda, he was one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples. He was kind of famous, very realized soul. But he went through several operations without any anesthetic, because he could just, at will, he could just withdraw his attention from the body. And the doctors could operate on him, it wouldn't bother him at all. And like that, everybody's got that capacity. But normally we don't, like I said, we're so used to grabbing hold of it that we don't realize we can be anything else. It's like you grab hold of a hot radiator, and you can say, "Oh, it's hot, it's burning. My hands are burning," and the thing is, let go of it, and then the problem's over. And you don't have to beat the radiator. Like most of us, we say, "Oh, I'm suffering, I'm burning," and then you try to beat other people and things and try to stop it. But all the time, as soon as you let go, then you'll find that you're free. That it loses its hold on you. So the strongest sense, the strongest sense of identity most people have is with the physical body. But that body is actually only an instrument, and the self is the one who's using the body. For its own purposes, the self has taken on this body, is using it. And if it is aware that it's the self, then that body is fine. Then the experiences come, that's fine. There's no problem. But when it loses its awareness of who it is and becomes totally absorbed in the body, then it's totally confined to what the body can experience. And it goes, when the body experiences pleasure, oh, it's happy. When the body experiences pain, then it's unhappy. And I think just last week I mentioned how Swami Varadananda, Swami in San Francisco, and given the example, he said, how would you feel if you were in a room and suddenly the walls started closing in on you? As I mentioned back last week, that when I was a kid, you'd go to the Saturday matinee for the kids, and one of the things they used to have in the movies were called cliffhangers. You know, a little 15-minute segment before the main movie, and always the hero would be just about ready to fall off a cliff or trapped in a room with a snake or something, and then it would end. And you'd come back next week to see how he survived. Well, one of the common things they used to do was the hero would be in a room and suddenly the walls would start closing in on him. And then you'd come back to see how did he get out of it. So like that, Swami Varadananda said that's what this life is like. We come into this room with a brand new body, energetic, full of energy, full of health, full of infinite possibilities. When we're young, we feel I can do anything. I can be an astronaut, I can be president, you know, there's no limit. But as we get older, as the years pass, gradually the walls start coming and closing in on us. When we were in high school or in college, we had the feeling, I can do anything. I can, all kinds of opportunities are there. But after some time, you're in a job, and you have to go to that job every day. Every day you got to get up in the morning, you got to commute, you got to go to the job, you got to come back and do your laundry, and like that. You suddenly find your whole life has just gotten down into a very humdrum kind of drudgery. And most people then and then it gradually gets even worse as the person's health deteriorates and falls apart and things. So like that, this human life, it can be, it's like that room that starts out and then slowly gets closer and closer and closer until many people by the time they reach their 80s or 90s aren't even functional anymore. But yet all the time, the real self within us, the real person, is totally free of all that. Totally unlimited, totally damaged by anything that happens. And so this is what we need to learn. People, we grab hold of life, we grab hold of the experiences of life, and we think, well, at first we think this is very good, but then we find slowly things are getting better, but we don't know how to let go of it anymore, how to get out of it anymore. And this is where, you have to, there's a kind of reversing of direction. Instead of putting all of our attention into our kind of life experiences, you begin to look within and wonder, well, what's there? What's there in the depths of me? And then from the depths of you start to come all the treasures of the divine presence there within. And gradually you see everything gets transformed again. So this is, like I said, as this verse says, all the sense organs are there, sight, hearing, everything else, they're all there, but they're not us. They're not the self. They're not who we are. They're just instruments. And the person who realizes he's something different than the instruments, both body and mind, as soon as a person realizes that, then he begins to discover that he's the self. He's a pure spiritual being filled with bliss, filled with wisdom, filled with love, filled with knowledge. All these things are his very nature, and he's then becomes immune to all the sorrows in the world. As I mentioned earlier, that as you begin to become a little detached, one thing that happens is that the world and your kind of mental states start to lose their domination over you. And only the fairly small, a little bit of progress towards spirit, towards spiritual consciousness, would take a person beyond sorrow. Because sorrow is something created by the mind. It has nothing to do with spirit. It has nothing to do with your real self. It's just a state of mind, and as you begin to kind of back off from those states of mind, to realize that that state of mind is not me, then eventually you find all the sorrows are going and they're replaced, rather by a sense of peace, of contentment, of just everything being okay. You know, it's, in my other class, meditation class, I read some accounts of a book called Everyday Enlightenment, about fairly ordinary people who achieved realization or enlightenment. And the common thing that almost every one of them said was that when this experience came, there was just a great sense that everything's okay, everything's fine, you know, and that's our natural state. Is everything is fine, everything's good, and so then you can actually enjoy the world. You can actually enjoy life. You enjoy when you have the happiness inside. Everything becomes happy, you know, and all your experiences then reflect that. You know, Swami Vivekananda has said that to the evil person, to the bad person, this world is hell. But to a good person, this same world is heaven. But then he said for the yogi, this very same world is God himself. To actually, as a person, as he grows spiritually, he begins to see, even in everyday, kind of mundane activities and so forth, you begin to sense the presence of God there. And then everything becomes wonderful and sacred. And instead of just ordinary, everyday, humdrum kind of existence, you find the kind of world being illuminated by the presence of God within. As a person grows spiritually, he doesn't necessarily get more knowledge. You know, he's not like he learns more facts about God or this or that. What happens is there's a transformation of consciousness. His life may not change, his life situation, events may go on the same as always. No particular change there, but he begins to, as his consciousness changes, the world changes. The same world that was there yesterday becomes something new, because you're beginning to see the kind of divinity shining through it. And the more that comes through, the more kind of you're begin to be filled with wonder and joy. It's like children have that sense. That for them, the world is a place full of excitement and wonder, and every day is like timeless. And that you begin to, if you get back into your real state, that's how you begin to live your life. You know, I've noticed that the older you get, is like whole decades just go by and you don't know where they're gone. You know, just time passes and you don't realize. But when you start to get back into spiritual consciousness, then you're starting to become aware of this eternal now, and the sense of rushing through time and I've got to do this and do that. You know, all that just starts to slow down, and you find that the very world, which was just very routine and uninteresting before, begins to become filled also with kind of wonderful things. And both inside and outside, you begin to realize, experience within your life that this transformation from what you call material consciousness, where whole consciousness is centered on matter, on the body, on the external experience, to the gradual unfoldment of the divine consciousness, the presence of God that's there within. So the organs, they're useful. There's nothing wrong with the organs, with the senses, or with the mind. But the problem is we identify with it, and when we identify with it, we become limited by that. So that we say, I am what's happening to this body. I am what's happening in this mind. We lose all sense of who we actually are. So the mind is superior to the sense organs. The intellect is superior to the mind. Superior to the intellect is the great self, Hiranyagarbha. Superior to the great self is the unmanifest, Avyakta. So the mind is superior to the sense organs in the sense that the mind is subtler, though they are all products of gross matter. The intellect is superior to the mind because it again is subtler, and it is also determinative in character. That is, it is capable of deciding what is right and what is wrong. The mind, however, lacks that capacity. It wavers and suffers from indecision. The great self, Hiranyagarbha, is the first manifestation of Brahma, the self, and it is seen as the individual self of all. Avyakta, the unmanifest, is also known as Prakriti or Maya. It is superior to Hiranyagarbha, again in the sense of being subtler. Earlier, it was stated that the self is separate from the sense organs. This does not mean that while the sense organs are within the body, the self must be somewhere else, somewhere outside. For if the self were somewhere outside, one would have to look for it outside. That is not what is intended here. It is like this. The self is supreme. Everything is derived from it. Because the self is there, the body and the mind both have a semblance of reality. The illusion of seeing a rope as a snake is possible only if there's a rope. Similarly, the self is a reality, and though the body and the mind are mere superimpositions on the self, they appear to be real. But they are real only in appearance. The self, however, is real, and is entirely separate from the body and the mind. So it says the mind is superior to the sense organs and the intellect is superior to the mind. Mind is, the word is manas, and intellect, the word is buddhi. And manas, that's the mind that kind of circulates impressions and memories and feelings and all kinds of things, kind of circulates around. And often we find we have difficulty making up our mind. We feel we need to reach some kind of decision, do something, but it's difficult because all these conflicting ideas. One part of the mind wants to do it, another part of the mind doesn't want to do it, and like that all this kind of things go on. And so people, often it's very difficult for a person to decide, this is what I'm going to do. Now the buddhi, this is a little deeper level than the mind. It's called intellect or the buddhi. This is what can decide, okay, this is what's right, this is what's true, this is the right way to go. In its true state, buddhi knows the truth. It sees the truth directly, and it just knows, okay, this is the right way to take. So, but usually if we're living on the kind of lower mind, manas, we're not aware of the buddhi so much, and so every decision tends to be fraught with a lot of thought and concern and worry and things like that. And even when we make the decision, we don't really know if it's the right thing to do, and like that. Whereas a person who's kind of gone a little deeper, started to get in touch with the buddhi or intellect, then he's got a much clearer idea. Okay, this is what to do. And some people are like that. This was when I first came, when Swami Varadananda, he was the Swami, we were back in Hyde Park then, it was back in the 70s, but that was one of the first characteristics I noticed about him, was his great capacity. Whatever situation would come up, he said, do this. And just right on the way, and things would get done. And I also found out that even though something I didn't agree with what he said, it didn't seem like the right thing, it always worked out the way. Whatever he said, it would tend to work out that way. And so, like that, some people, they have this capacity, and it's one of the great kind of stress reducers in life is to be able to make solid decisions like that without backtracking, without worrying, without fear. Just say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and then a person's life tends to become then very efficient and very much less stress than the average person who's struggling through all of these conflicting and worries and fears and things. So what if I do this? Well, what if this will happen? And like that, we tend to get totally confuse ourselves. So the buddhi is that deeper level. And its true state, its pure state, it just knows, can sees truth directly. It knows what's right, it knows what's true, because it just knows it. It's not it doesn't reason about it. It doesn't, use logic and say, well, this or this or that. It just knows it. But then deeper than the mind, or deeper than the intellect, superior to the intellect, is a great self. This is called Hiranyagarbha. This is a cosmic mind. This whole universe, they're all contained within the cosmic mind, Hiranyagarbha. And so that cosmic mind pervades everything, and it contains everything. So we're all kind of ideas within that cosmic mind, trying to express itself. Deeper than cosmic mind is what they call the avyakta, or the unmanifested. It's a deeper, prior to the creation of the universe, in the cosmic mind, you have a consciousness that's there. And then deeper than that, ultimately, you get back to Brahman, the one reality. So any questions on this? Yeah.
I don't understand this right, but the eventual ultimate existence, is that going to be just pure consciousness?
Yeah.
So then it's going to be part of the universal
consciousness? It's going to be pure consciousness. It's actually, when you get back to Brahman, it's actually even beyond the universe itself. In other words, the universe is like a little bubble in the ocean, and eventually you get back to something bigger than the bubble. But yeah, in a sense, it doesn't mean that you become conscious of every little amoeba and plant and ant and everything going on. But it means that you get into the consciousness, into the ocean, into the water, out of which all the different waves come. It's not necessarily that you'll be connected with every single wave, but you'll be connected with the ocean, which is the source of all the waves.
Would you still have your identity, then? Individual identity under this?
The thing that says this is me will still be there. Right now, the thing that's saying this is me is saying this body is me. But when you actually, if you get beyond the body, you discover that the thing, the thing which says this is me, the body may be gone, but the thing that says this is me is still there, but now it's expanded, it's grown into something bigger. And I get there are many layers, levels of consciousness as you move towards the infinite, each one better, bigger than the rest of them. But all the time, there's the sense of, okay, this is me.
What I wonder is what will be the experience of being in that particular state?
Well, it's something that has never, they say, cannot be described because it's simply beyond, it's a different type of reality than what we know. It's like, suppose somebody's been blind from birth, and then you're trying to explain what the color orange is like. Well, you can say, well, orange is kind of a warm color, but you can't really explain it because they don't have any experience to really know what orange is. All you can do is kind of give some kind of ideas. They say, this is what it is. Situation of spiritual teachings, when you get to the mystical level, to the high level, you said the people who have experienced it, the great saints and all, they can't explain it to an ordinary person because the ordinary person doesn't have anything to compare it to. And so it becomes very difficult. So they use metaphors or parables or things like that to try to give an idea of it. And so what that, in other words, if a person attains Brahman consciousness, what he actually experiences can't be explained, but it's something very good. If you think that out of Brahman, all this universe has come, and that's just a little tiny bit of Brahman, then even though you can't describe Brahman in terms like he's like a great big hot fudge sundae or something, you realize it must be something good, and something really worth finding. But right now we've got our small self, our sense of identity based on body, based on mind. In order to get to the next step, we have to be able to kind of let go of that and move. And then we see, suddenly we go through a lot of struggle, perhaps, on the way. A lot of difficulties trying to get beyond that, a lot of resistance. But then eventually you hit a plateau. And you realize that, well, my consciousness is not the old kind of selfish personal consciousness I was before, but it's still me. But now it's got a better view. It sees more. It's things are clear, and like that, it grows. Each step, usually on the path, it tends to create a struggle, a resistance, of wanting to hold on and stay the way you are. But when you reach the next step, the next plateau, then you know, this is something better than what I had before. Like as a very physical, say, human being, a physical state of consciousness, you get some joy. You eat a good meal, you listen to music, you have some enjoyments. And as a person says, no, you should go meditate. And that seems really boring. And so a person doesn't want to do it. But then after he meditates for a while, then you say, I'm starting to feel pretty good. I'm starting to feel, kind of happier and less and then you find that this desire to go to rock concerts or things like that, gradually that desire kind of just disappears because you found something better. And like that, there's this gradual kind of moving from one level to the next to the next. There's always usually the struggle of letting go of where the level you're at now until you reach the new level. And then you say, I've made progress. This is better. So in other words, trying to explain why a person would want Brahman consciousness is very difficult because it's not in any terms that the person would appreciate. Like you'll get a heavenly mansion or you'll have this or that. But when it's attained, then everybody says, well, this is it. This is a kind of wonderful thing. And when a person comes back to life, back to the kind of the world, they manifest a much greater degree of kind of power and things than ordinary people do.
It almost seems like at that level, when you finally reach it, everything becomes static.
No, they say, well, that's how you think because we can't conceive of what it is, and so it seems like just as this big cloud or something. You just sit there, but it's actually. In one sense, it doesn't change, but in one sense, it's infinitely expressing itself. Now, in Hindu mythology, like for example, this Katha Upanishad, you've got the Yama, one of the gods, god of death, talking, teaching Nachiketa. Then you have various other gods in Hindu mythology. Now, all of those different gods, these different kind of great cosmic powers, represent individuals who have made some progress on the spiritual path. In which they've grown beyond this very small human being with this very small kind of experiences, except because of their unselfishness and spiritual development, they've now reached a point where they're identifying more with the whole universe and they become then kind of gods of the universe. Higher than that ultimately is Brahman, which is, like I said, indescribable. But in which we can grow. We can. The more selfish a person is, the more they contract, and the smaller they become, so that the whole world is, what am I going to get for dinner? Like that. But then, as a person begins to develop spiritually, they're starting to grow and expand, and eventually there's just no limit to it. What we can describe, like say gods or goddesses, things like that, that's only like stages in the realm. When you get into actually the nature of the absolute around, it can't be described because it's nothing like anything we experience. And see, well, okay. Anyway. So does that kind of clarify a little bit? But nobody can actually say what it's like because as human beings, unless you've had the experience yourself, you don't know what they're talking about. The more advanced you go on the path, the more these things can make sense to you. But and so each person, and this is when you read scriptures or anything else, each person would take it according to their own level of understanding. One person may just see kind of a lot of superstition, and another person may see deep spiritual truth, depending on how their consciousness, the state of their consciousness. And so when you talk about Brahman, for most people, it's pretty meaningless and kind of uninspiring. But for anyone who's sensed it a little bit even, they say, oh yeah, this is the most wonderful thing in the world. So any other questions? Yeah, okay, I'm going to stop there. So we are, let me see. This Sunday we have Swami Varadananda. He will be doing his regular talk on meditation according to the yoga aphorisms. That'll be Sunday 11. On Tuesday he will do the class on Gospel of Shama Krishna in Panchamaveda. Friday we'll continue with this, and we're almost at the very end of the book. Maybe one or two more classes, and then we'll go on to another. Actually, we're very close to the end of the book. So anyway, so a few more weeks on this one, then we'll go to a different Upanishad. And then next weekend, we're having a retreat at Ganges, 25th to the 27th, something like that, up at Ganges with Swami Prasanatmananda from Berkeley Center. And then in November, November 8th through the 11th, we're having our big celebration. Chicago calling, celebrating Swami Vivekananda's 150th birth anniversary. There are over over 50 monks and nuns of the Ramakrishna order will be here. Devotees from around the world are coming, and so it's going to be a very big program. It'll be the main programs, public programs are on the 9th and 10th, and they'll be at the Chicago Hilton, downtown Chicago at 720 South Michigan Avenue. And I think there's forms and flyers and things down on the table in the lobby. So then, so I think things are getting more and more crazy, getting ready for that. And then after, once we get past that, then life will go back to normal. Om Asatoma Sadyamya Tamasoma Jyotirgamya Vidyurmam Amritam Gamya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death